I'm Dr. T. Lynn Smith, and I'm here with Pamela Bosworth, and we are from the Jack McDowell School for Leadership Development. And this month, our topic is about grieving. Grieving is certainly something that we don't talk much about, but we all experience it, whether it's through loss of a job or loss of a loved one. But certainly, grieving is something that we all have experienced, or maybe even experiencing right now. So, Pam, I have a couple questions that I'd like to ask if you would indulge me.
Okay.
I'd like to know, what do you define as grieving, or what is grieving in your mind?
Well, the meaning behind the word grief, it's really defined individually, I think, by each person. I mean, for some people it means one thing, and for others it takes on a different meaning. Now, for me, as I think about it, for me, grief is a feeling of sorrow or sadness and suffering. I think people grieve in different ways.
So, with that in mind, what are some of the signs that someone is grieving? How might you recognize the signs of someone grieving?
I think that they grieve, and we all grieve in different ways. It's not really like there's a set of characteristics.
Okay.
To me, that you can just tick off or check off to determine if someone's grieving. Having said that, I think that really one of the most important things would be to pay attention to extreme changes in someone. And that's important. And of course, the more you know a person well, the more you're going to be aware of those extreme changes. If you don't know them very well, then it could be that the best way you could contribute in that situation, as I think about it, is to talk to someone who does know them very well. For example, I might say, I noticed that Dr. T. Lynn Smith is like this. Is she normally like that? Or have you noticed it? It could be that God wants to use us for a person to help or assist a person who is grieving, but to do it through one who really knows them very well.
And it makes sense. You're simply just paying attention.
You really are.
That's wow. That's something. Mm-hmm. Think back to an experience of loss from your leadership experience that caused you to grieve. Mm-hmm. Something you want to share?
Yes and no. Yes, I will. It's difficult really to share those times, but I did have a specific time in my leadership journey when I was toppled from a high place that I felt that I had worked hard to get to. And I use the word toppled because it wasn't of my choosing. It included betrayal of a deep level, and it happened quickly, and it was brutal. And even now, as you can tell, I struggle to find the words to adequately convey the deep sadness and sorrow and suffering from that experience. Here's the thing I notice about it, though, and I'm thankful for this question, and it's because I realized that I grieved for what I had lost externally. For all that I thought I had worked for. But there was another dimension to that, and it was my grieving for something internal. It was really the complete and utter loss of control. Everything was out of my control, and it was really overwhelming.
That's something. That's really something. So with that in mind, what tools did you use to grieve successfully? Wow.
That's quite a question. And I wish I could share that I just reached right into my toolbox and pulled out a set of tools to use in this situation. But the truth is that at that time, I can tell you, for me personally, there were no tools that worked consistently all the time, that were useful and successful all the time. And I think that's the nature of the grieving process that grief takes on in our lives. And Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who her writings on the process of grief, which include denial and anger and bargaining and depression and acceptance and the vacillating back and forth all through that, really gets to the heart of what's going on in times of grief.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense. From your interactions and your observations of leaders you've worked with, what are some of the negative results that have come as a result of them avoiding grief or the grieving process?
Well, I know that what helped me the most in my time that I was sharing with you guys is in fact it was time. And it was time, and it was my faith. I don't want to sound cliche, but that is the truth. And I think about as you ask that question, in the words of Dr. Henry Cloud, he says people can't really disinvest themselves and move on unless they say goodbye to what has been. Now, that sounds so hard and cruel. And you and I would never say that to someone who's in the throes of grieving the loss of a loved one. But to deny or avoid grief is really debilitating, and it drains people. It drains a person of all of their energy. So I think that is really sums it up in a nutshell about avoiding grief or trying to deny it or avoid it. It just drains you of all your energy. It's just very debilitating.
Certainly. And like everything, there's a process. The one thing that I think disturbs me about grief or watching someone grieve is you think or you say, it's been 5 years, you're still grieving. There's no magic number that says you can only grieve so many years for the loss of a loved one, or if you lose a job, or whatever the loss might be. It is specific to each person and each person's personality. With that in mind, what are the positive results that you saw when you addressed the grieving period or the grieving period?
Well, I believe one of the most beneficial results when a person turns the corner, and that sort of is how it felt in my life. I sort of turned a corner very slowly. It was sort of a turning, and it was the recognition and the acceptance of a new reality. I was then able to refocus my energy toward what was ahead, because in fact, life does go on, even though you don't think it will at the time.
Certainly. When leaders grieve, it impacts those who work for them. What can leaders do to be more mindful of how their personal grief affects him or her?
Well, I think mindful is the key word there. I think if a leader is in grief right this very minute, it's unrealistic for those around him or her to expect at that moment that they're going to think logically, But having said that, I think if you're a leader right now who's not going through the grieving process, then you can become mindful right now of the fact of what you just said, that it is going to impact. And you can then begin to look inwardly, yourself, okay, what is it most likely when I'm under these sort of situations that I'm going to be, demonstrating or displaying, or simply a matter of just being open and honest. I think another important thing for leaders is give yourself permission to pull away.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
That's very good.
Give yourself permission to pull away. Yeah.
My last question is this. We have a saying that we do not get clarity, or we do not get to clarity alone. So please, why is it important for leaders who are experiencing loss to have an accountability group or professional assistant?
Well, I agree with that. I really do, and only to a degree. I think, and here's the caveat for that, I think timing is everything. Timing is everything, because as we started out this saying, people grieve differently, at their own pace, at their own process. And it's very important at a certain time in the process to have an accountability partner, to join a support group, or to get professional assistance. But there again, it's not like you can just put a fence around it and say at 3 months this, at 6 months this, or whatever. But I think all of us need to have that impetus to re-engage in life. And that's why I think those that are around us who know us so well, timing is so important. When it is the right time, you can gently urge, nudge, encourage that person and make a way for them to begin to engage again.
Absolutely. Pam, thank you for this time. And for those of you that are watching, we thank you for sharing this time with us. We look forward to the next opportunity for the Jack McDowell School for Leadership Development to come and share with you. May you have a wonderful day.